Halloween 2 vs. Friday the 13th Part 2. Michael Myers vs. Jason Voorhees. Who has the better sequel? Let's find out. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Isn't it amazing that in 1981 we got the first sequels to these two major slasher franchises? Together, these juggernauts combined for 23 total films. Both series are beloved by fans, and both series had their ups and their downs. But who had the better sequel? Let's start by taking a look at both of these sequels. We'll talk about their merits and their shortcomings, and then we'll compile the data to give the definitive answer to whom shall reign supreme. Let's start with Halloween 2. As a follow-up to the first film, it succeeds on almost every level. Most sequels have to pull a lot of strings to make them possible, but in this case, the sequel picks up mere seconds after the first one ends. We still get Michael Myers missing after being shot 6 times, and Laurie and Dr. Loomis are still in the house. It's faithful, and it doesn't have to retcon anything. Laurie gets transported to the hospital to take care of the wounds that she suffered in the first film, and Dr. Loomis continues his search for Michael Myers. Michael slashes his way through town looking for his lost baby sister, who turns out to be none other than Laurie Strode's. Dr. Loomis pieces this together and chases Michael into the hospital where the final showdown occurs. Halloween 2 is fantastic, but what about Friday the 13th Part 2? Again, the film does a pretty good job of continuing the story. However, it does have to retcon itself in the process. Alice, the sole survivor of the first film, has moved away from Camp Crystal Lake and is trying to forget the events of that horrible night. That is, until she looks in her fridge and finds the severed head of Pamela Voorhees, the killer of the first film, in her fridge. Alice then gets an ice pick to the temple and dies. 4 years later, a group of 20-some-year-olds decide to open Camp Blood back up. During a campfire story, they explain that Jason, the handicapped boy who drowned in the lake, may not have actually drowned, but instead survived in the woods all these years. They claim that he could have seen his mother get decapitated, and now he's on a murderous spree. Well, that's the logic we're given, so that's the logic we'll go with. Jason does in fact go on a killing spree, one so grand that it would make his mother proud. With the plot summary out of the way, let's start comparing the two bad boys. Michael Myers is the killer in Halloween 2, reprising his role from the first film. The continuity is appreciated, however, Michael has changed a bit. In this film, he devolves into more of a traditional slasher villain. In the first film, he's shadow-esque and just a force that hangs around. In this film, is a guy in a mask who kills people. The personality that he once had isn't quite there anymore. Now, it's not the worst version of Michael Myers that we'll ever get, but already we start to see that decline in the effectiveness of the character. Now for Friday the 13th. There was no feasible way to bring back the killer of the first film. They literally cut off the killer's head. How do you bring that back? They were in a pickle, so they thought of a roundabout way to bring a killer into the mix. That killer was the already dead Jason Voorhees, the son of Pamela. Bringing him back to life was a real stretch and formed creative differences amongst some of the crew. Tom Savini, the special effects artist on the first film, left the second film due to this change. Savini stated, "Bringing back Jason didn't make any sense. He was the kid who drowned in the first film. The mother is the killer. Changing killers was a bold move, but one that completely paid off. Jason Voorhees is one of the most recognized slasher villains of all time. Even though the cold, bulky hockey mask look is iconic today, it wasn't the look Jason first donned. Instead, Jason went for a hillbilly approach that really sells him living off the land. He wears a burlap sack over his head and wears overalls. He runs around and is admittedly human. Even though Friday the 13th Part 2 created one of the most iconic slasher villains of all time, he's a bit too far removed from that force that we all know and love. So this round goes to Michael Myers and his attempt at staying more true to his original concept. Okay, we just talked about the killers. Now let's find out which film has the better story and setting. Halloween 2 does much to add to the mythos of Haddonfield and Michael Myers. We get some background into why Michael is after Laurie, but it's not too much information where we would lose focus on the true terror at hand. It's just enough motivation to keep the plot going. The reveal that Laurie is Michael's sister is one that the series would use extensively for years to come. The hospital is a great destination for a final act. However, I want to note that the Halloween vibe isn't as strong in this film. The first film oozes that Halloween spirit, but the second one really loses touch with that awe and wonder. Friday the 13th Part 2 really changes direction with its killer, but that's basically the only change that it makes from the first one. The formula that was so successful in the first film is still heavily used here. We have drunk, horny camp counselors on a campground getting picked off one by one. Is it to the benefit of the film? Some would argue yes. The killer has changed, so changing it any more than that could alienate fans of the first film. But did they do enough to really set it apart from the first film? Outside of the killer? No, not really. By not changing the killer, but instead changing the location and the story, Halloween Part 2 is able to give a new twist to an already existing threat. Friday the 13th Part 2 follows too closely to the original, almost to the point where it doesn't matter who the killer is. The winner of this round goes to Halloween Part 2. Which sequel has the best final girl? Halloween 2 has the return of the best, most iconic, and original final girls of all time, Laurie Strode's. By having her be related to Michael, it adds another twist and dynamic to the character, and arguably builds her character up. It's just unfortunate that she is underutilized here outside of the last act. She has her moments for sure, but being already beaten up from the first film, she seems a little more frail here. Friday the 13th Part 2 has Ginny, who is a big step up from Alice. She is strong, independent, and willing to stand up for herself. She's smart and resourceful too. She's able to fight back with Jason by using her brain. This is a tough one. I mean, it's Laurie Strode's. It's just so unfortunate that she's next to useless in this film. Ginny is one of the best final girls in the Friday franchise, and she's the winner of this round. The last part that we're going to take a look at is the legacy that these sequels have left behind and their importance in their respective franchise. Halloween 2 is very important for the franchise. Once they bring Michael back in Part 4, he is constantly going after a family member in each of his films, except for one that we'll get into later. The revelation that Laurie is his sister is the jumping off board for every film after Part 3. It's cemented into the franchise. Friday the 13th Part 2 is also very important for the franchise. The undrowning of Jason Voorhees can be felt throughout all of horror cinema. We get the birth of one of the best slasher villains ever. Each film in the franchise revolves around him or the idea of him. He's sort of a big deal. This round is close, but I have to give it to Friday the 13th Part 2. Jason Voorhees is just too iconic to be defeated by family matters. So, the scoreboard is 2-2. Who wins? Well, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you without hesitation that Halloween 2 is the superior sequel. It's better made, higher quality, and it's just as important to its respected franchise. But hindsight is 2020. The elephant in the room here is Halloween 2018. Halloween 2018 is a great film in the series and one that fans absolutely adore. The problem is, Halloween 2018 completely cuts out Halloween 2. Halloween 2 is no longer important for the story of Michael Myers. Heck, Halloween 2018 even makes fun of it.
She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
And you know what? The fans seem to be okay with this. Yes, the family ties helped the series go on for many years, but it seems that the fans were tired of it by the end. It was too convoluted and people didn't care. So even though Halloween 2 may be better made and more polished, it's no longer as important. There's a logical way to bypass Halloween 2 and still get the whole Halloween story, at least a version of it. You can't look at Friday the 13th without thinking about Jason Voorhees. It's arguably the most important film in that whole franchise. Friday the 13th Part 2 is the starting point for Jason Voorhees, while Halloween 2 is the point that is no longer deemed necessary. Friday the 13th Part 2 is the better sequel, in my opinion. Let me know your opinion in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and take care, everyone.